Hey everyone, welcome to Arcane Precision. My name is John, and today we are doing another episode of our Army Spotlights. This time we are covering Cryx Necrofactorium. That's what it's called? Yes. And with us we have Brad Park. Say hello.
Hello, happy to be here, John.
Happy to have you. Thanks for coming on. Yeah, we're just going to chat a little bit of Cryx. I know. You are very well known as a competitive player and used to have a podcast back in the day. But for those that don't know you, you want to give us a little bit of an introduction about you and your Warmachine life and all that?
Absolutely happy to. So I started back in Mark II. I don't remember how many years ago, but somewhere in Mark II. I know I started playing before Convergence came out for whatever time frame that is. Anyway, yeah, was a member of Fully Boosted for years. We podcasted for quite a bit of time and really kind of stopped pre-COVID. But that was myself, Matt McWaters, Pete Soretti, Grant Ritchie, Ryan Hoffman joined us for a bit. So had a lot of fun with that. In terms of playing, I was on the US WTC team in 2022. Our team went 5-1. We came in sixth. I've been on a few podium ATC and OTC teams. I podiumed at a few conventions back years ago. I haven't really. I think I took second at ATC this year, but haven't podiumed anything individually since kind of returning. I'd taken a bit of a hiatus post COVID, was playing some Kings of War, but I'm very happy to be back playing Warmachine. I think the game is doing fantastic. My original faction back through Mark II and Mark III was always Cryx, going between Dark Host, Ghost Fleet, the Styxis theme, whatever that was called. So played kind of all of them. And then at the end of Mark III, before I kind of stepped out of the game for a minute, was playing minions, just will work for food minions when it was all Riot Quest and Archon machine. I'm very happy the game is in the state it's in now.
Yeah, I remember you were playing Ragnar, I think it was.
Yeah, you're right. So I was playing that minions scroll cross theme.
Hmm.
So played a lot of Rask, played a lot of Ragnar. Thought he was great. Though my favorite thing to play in minions, even though I didn't bring it to WTC, was Helga One. What a pile of nonsense she was.
She still is. I have a local that once in a while he'll play her, and yeah, she's still nonsense. Not as good, but
Yeah, I mean, you give her all the Riot Quest options though, with Totem Hunter able to walk and jump, Flugwug walking and jumping, the Void Archons placing behind things and then slamming them.
oh god,
Primal Archon's interaction was also, not to get stuck in the weeds of a game that really doesn't exist anymore, but
yeah,
a Primal Archon could hit something in melee, slam it D6, and then after it moved, place a 4-inch ring around it of everything in that is knocked down. So the Primal Archon on feet turn would just go bowling. Um, that list was a lot of fun. Had so many angles to hide from,
yeah,
and it's such a better thing not to exist because it was a ridiculous list.
right. Well, so it sounds like you're back home to Crix. Has over the years has drawn you to playing Crix?
I think minions were probably the most alive thing I've really kind of ever played. I don't necessarily know why, because I don't really pick armies for the aesthetics generally, and I'm gonna then immediately negate what I'm saying with the thing I'm gonna say next, where it feels like no matter what game I play, regardless of the system, whether it's a physical medium like a tabletop miniature game to an online video game to whatever, I always generally play the undead armies,
Yeah. So you have a
or
type, yeah.
undead factions, or yeah. So I say that I don't really care about the background, and then I immediately care about the background. So I just lie to myself. So I generally just stick to the undead kind of factions. I do think that those factions, regardless of game, miniature game or not, all kind of have similar tropes where they're generally a bit slower, have recursive elements, generally have a weaker ranged game. Will sometimes have like a strong kind of magic user to make up for their lack of a ranged game, like actual bows or guns or whatever. But when getting to melee is when you either have swarm mechanics to where you kind of overwhelm your opponent, or kind of hyper elite melee things. But it's generally always a melee focus, generally slower, but not always. Sometimes you get kind of quick, elite, fragile melee units. It feels like no matter what the system is, those things always remain true, right? Whether it was
Right.
vampire counts in Warhammer Fantasy to undead in Warcraft 3, you don't really have range stuff. It's always all melee.
Right, right. And usually tends to be like a horde style,
Hmm.
lots of chaff.
Yep.
So how would you say uh new Cryx is from old Cryx? How different it is?
Yeah, so it feels like, and I you know it's funny. Early in the episode, I mentioned all the names of the old theme lists for Cryx and Mark III, Dark Host, and Ghostblade. Them,
Hmm.
and I can't think of the one that was made up and comprised of like the undead, like Mechanothralls and Soul Hunters, Necrotechs. I can't remember the name of that one. Um, at the end, I mean, similar to kind of old Black Industries, I guess, where you used to get Carapace, except no
Right.
Carapace theme benefit now. That would be too good if you did. Oh my god! But I think the thing to think about is if you're just thinking about Mark III Cryx, really even Mark II Cryx, you don't have the speed and living elements like you would have out of a boarding party, Satixis Raiders, etc. You're really playing kind of Mechanothralls, right? Like you're playing the kind of the chaff melee focused kind of recursive style. Like there's no like I guess what I'm getting at is there's no way to play like the elite kind of Bane list. Like those models generally don't exist. Um
Right.
the closest you get is you do have a slew and a really good wealth of options for like these medium base 8-point models. But if you're looking at other factions, like there's a handful of factions that have very similar model profiles, whether it's the medium base guys out of Storm Legion. I can't think of any Thunderers, I think. Um,
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, like, it feels like most factions have like that medium based kind of chunkier melee unit, Thunderers, Howlers, etc. So that's not necessarily unique to Cryx. I think what's unique to Cryx is with those models being our only like ways to interact with our opponent because we don't have many guns, you generally find like maybe one more special rule or something to that end than you would across other melee units in other factions, right? Like brutes and sludges have evasive. You don't generally see that out of the other medium bases, while also having similar kind of melee output that you would see from the others. So to kind of answer your original question, how do they compare? I think you're playing how you would before with bringing back Mechanothralls with your surgeons there. It's very similar to that. I don't think there's a lot of parallel to like old Statixis lists or old Bane lists.
Okay, that makes sense. I would probably add that I remember Cryx players and Mark II, Mark III complaining about how bad their projects were,
Yeah.
and you guys seem to have gotten an upgrade there.
Yeah, I mean that's very true, right? So I feel like most Cryx lists brought an Arc Node or two to be able to get your spells where you needed them. You know what, I do have something else I should say about how we're describing things real quick. Yeah, the Warjacks are much better. I think there are still casters that really want to take a wealth of infantry, so not every caster is running those Warjacks. But I think another kind of key difference is while you still need Arc Nodes, and while we do have Calamity on the rack to debuff our opponents, Cryx now feels like you removed all of your kind of debuffing that you had to do, and has turned into a buff faction. Like it feels like you're playing Mark III Cryx within reason, with better warjacks to be fair,
Yeah,
but with a like Menoth spell list, right? Like it between the ability to put buffs on your own models and units, like it feels more Menothy in the spell design between Scything Touch to Carnage to Power of Death off the Furies, Synergy off Morton Abra, etc. It feels like a lot more self buffing.
interesting. Yeah, it sounds like you rely a little less on mortality, calamity, stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I feel like the casters that would kind of be most prominent in Mark III, generally at least, like you had Denegra one who had the feet debuff combined with Crippling Grasp and Parasite, so a lot of debuffing. You had Denegra 3 spamming out mortalities. You had Venethrax spamming out, well, not spamming out, but getting out some mortalities. You had Lich 1 armor debuffing. Even Lich 3, who was kind of the Warjack menace, had Calamity on his spell rack, or not a spell rack, his spell list.
Hmm.
And I think the only caster that really avoided debuffing kind of at all that was really kind of prominent still was Scar 1. Scar 1 kind of only buffed her own stuff.
Yep.
Everyone else was generally debuffing to get their things where they needed to go. And I feel like Mark 4 Cryx, the Necrofactorium, does a lot of applying benefits to your own units to increase their output.
That's cool. All right. Yeah, we can move on to the next section. Let's talk about basically what integral pieces of playing Necrofactorium are. Like, what models stand out? What could you recommend to someone just starting out with the army?
Yeah, if you're just starting with Necrofactorum, I think the things I would reach for first that generally find their way into lists more than not is at least one unit of Mechanothralls. I hesitate to play any list without at least one. And then with them, you're going to need a Scarlet Lieutenant. The Scarlet Lieutenant has a leadership aura that turns that unit into shield guards. And then them being shield guards is one very good by itself, but then your other kind of mainstay unit in the faction that almost every list runs two of, some lists only run one. I really have not seen any lists that run none. Is the Necrosurgeon Initiates, I think is what they're called. These guys kind of do everything you would want them to do in this faction. They're both your empower bots to make your casters not have to allocate as heavily, as well as being your Grim Returns unit so that you're able to recur models. You can recur really any unit in the list, with the not exception. Actually, there's no exception. You can recur any unit in the list, with the only exception would being is if the whole unit dies. So you have a unit of 5 shield guards and Mechanothralls near a Scarlet Lieutenant, and then as they're kind of jumping in front of Primeval out of Old Umbry, kind of spear throws to the buzzsaw off Aberration to any one of the guns that you see semi often. After they kind of jump in front of with Shield Guard, then you can then recur them with the Necrosurgeon. So you get to be pretty resilient into non-spray ranged attacks. The only gunshots that become a question of should you or should you not shield guard them are shots that also RFP. So headshot
Yeah.
off of the Black 13th if they're being led by Kane. If they're shooting a Warjack, do you really want to shield guard? You can do it and you can prevent the damage that shield guard, but you only get to do it once because then you get headshotted off the table.
Right.
So yeah, those are our mainstay. So I would say 1 and 2 Necrosurgeons for sure. At least 1 unit of Mechanothralls. If you're playing Subseer, you'll need more than one because I think you generally want to start with one and then you feet one in. You're going to need at least 1 Scarlet Lieutenant. I've never really run more than one, but I could imagine a situation where you might if the points just don't work for anything else. After that, as kind of was mentioned before, the Malefactors are generally pretty good. So 1 or 2 Malefactors, especially if you magnetize the arms, which why wouldn't you? You just have a tremendous amount of play, whether you want to do Harpoon Malefactors for drag threats, you just want to do Axes and Shields, you want to put a ranged output into the list, and you want to take Spikers. You have a couple different directions you can go with Malefactors, and there's really no wrong choice. It's a more about how you want to play the list. And then after that, you kind of have a whole selection of some really great 8-point units. So Criterions, which you can get for free basically by 3D printing them, to Sludge Thralls, to Brute Thralls. They all serve a pretty good role. They all do it. Well, Brutes and Criterions are the most similar, and they still approach the table a little differently. And then Sludges, I don't think every list needs 2 Sludges. I even play some lists with none, but they are just a really outstanding unit. Between they're one of the few things in Cryx that has a ranged output, and then also just being pretty tough to trade into for some opposing armies because when they die, they cause a corrosive damage roll to models around them. So low arm models near them can have a pretty tough time fighting into them in melee.
Yeah, those things are the bane of my existence. I hate them so much.
Yeah, and you should for good reason. They're very good. They are susceptible to guns. Cryx has some gun defenses. In like Eviscerus has D-Cell, you have Occultation on the rack, You can get them shield guards. One of the kind of the tough things with the shield guards is if a sludge thrall dies, it does that damage roll to every model within 2 inches. So if you have shield guards kind of interlaced through your unit and one of them dies, you end up killing all your shield guards.
Uh,
Another few models I think will find their way into some lists because they threaten further than everything else. Night Terrors have a bit of a role within the faction, so they're the most fragile kind of elite models we have. Between Shield Guards though, and them being naturally incorporeal, they're can be tough to deal with, and they just always threaten 13 with Apparition. Most everything else in the faction threatens 9 or 10 inches, so it's a pretty big change. I will say though, I think they make their way into some lists, not all of them. So that'd be something kind of more to get the more you play Necrofactorium. I wouldn't jump to those first. And that really kind of touches all the units. As for solos, any list that's running like more than 2 Warjacks is probably going to want Chatterbane. And then in reference to other souls, if you're running Criterions, you're probably going to want Selexis, so you have the Vet Leader. Selexis is also a pretty good choice in lists where the positioning may really matter. So what I mean by that is there are some lists where your threat ranges are really pretty low, so you're not running Night Terrors, you're not running heavies that threaten very far. So Lexus really does a fair bit with Befuddle to try to bring your threat ranges up, because if you can charge one model in a unit, like if I can move one of your models in a unit forward and charge it with one of my models in a unit, I can probably place guys far enough back to reach other members of the unit that I just pulled forward. So that can help with some lower threat range lists. Plus, the Vet Leader off of Criterions is nice. Thymestra probably finds its way into more lists than not, just for the fact of having a free upkeep and the ability to cast a free spell. Cryx's spell rack is really pretty strong. You have Scything Touch on the rack, which is something that's often taken. So almost every caster is going to have that upkeep, even if they don't start with one, which now that I'm thinking about it, is there a caster that doesn't start with an upkeep? I'd have to think about that. I don't want to waste time on that. But another really strong spell on the rack is Ghost Walk. So having just a free Ghost Walk a turn can be huge. So Thymestra is going to find its way into more lists than not. Also, another model that can be printed for free effectively with a 3D printer. And then, as always within Cryx, some lists you're going to only want one. Sometimes you run two. Raptors are also really good. Getting your spells out where you need them is just always been a hallmark of Cryx with cheap arc nodes. I think I've hit almost all the models. The only thing I haven't touched on is the character warjacks. I think the one that's going to get taken the most, or be the easiest to use, generally is probably Hades. I think with command cards having Lucky Penny able to put a soul onto them, combined with ancillary shot off of Chatterbane, almost I think any list that's taking Hades, even if he's the only heavy warjack, probably also wants Chatterbane. For any listener that might not know the interaction, the gun on Hades has ray shot. So if you spend a soul when shooting it, the attack ignores line of sight, ignores concealment, cover, and then every attack and damage roll with that ranged attack is boosted, including the blast damage. So you get a lot of value out of that one soul. So what you can end up doing is activating, even if you only have one soul on you, activate with Hades. You can spend focus for his initial shot to boost the attack and damage rolls wherever you need them, and then activate with Chatterbane, shoot out of activation, spending a soul, and then fully boost it a second time. Those are really strong gun battery out of just those two models. And is within reason pretty much the only guns you get in Cryx outside of a Hellraker or sprays off sludges or the spray off the Malfesser. Everything else is spells, and then Nicane's gun herself. I guess Kythos has a gun too. What I'm getting at is like but that ranged output out of Hades is really one of the only few guns you get unless you're taking spikers on Malfactors.
yeah.
Especially a boostable gun. And then Grendel and Malfesser have a place, but I would get those later on into collecting the faction.
Right.
And then the same thing with the Hellraker. I think the Hellraker has a place, but I wouldn't run out and get it. It's going to make some list pairs. I don't think it's going to make every list pair.
Makes sense. Usually with a Colossal, you don't want it everywhere. Unless it's really, really, really good. Which, I mean, the Hellraker seems decent.
Hellraker's good. It's certainly got some shortcomings. It's it's probably ranged wise, and for good reason, right? You can't give this to Cryx, but it's probably of all the colossals in the game, the worst one ranged output wise.
Mm.
The flip side to that is it's also the most frustrating to kill compared to every other colossal.
Oh, move around. Yes.
Well, I mean, between the moving around to the void plates to having debris field to put rough terrain around it at all times,
Mm.
to having carapace grenades. Like
Yeah.
it has a handful of really niche defensive pieces that other colossals just don't have. Right? What other
Right.
colossals will have is they'll have just a higher volume of attacks. So where like a phantasm out of dusk can be a bit of a hammer with the amount of guns it has combined with its melee output being certainly not the worst, right? With I think decap on one of them and whatever it is, right? It's got a lot of output, has a lot of initials. The Hellraker has nearly half the initials, and is a very similar kind of defense and armor and boxes, but has just a slew of other rules that make it more frustrating to kill compared to the Phantasm. Just to use the Phantasm as a reference point, I think the
Yeah.
Phantasm has, is it 6 initials? The 2 melee weapons, the 2 guns attached to the melee weapons, chest, and like I think it has a base range attack. So I think it has 6 initials.
Sounds about right.
The Hellraker has 3, so literal half, and then everything after that you're buying attacks.
From experience, the Abyssal King has a lot of initials. Like,
Yeah, Abyssal King has a lot. Like they all do, which is perfectly fine. I
right.
think the Hellraker just fills a very different void. It is just very defensive and can be, depending on the list you're playing, it can be very frustrating to kill for your opponent.
That seems pretty cool to have something different. It's not. It doesn't have the same role as all the other colossals. It doesn't seem like it, at least.
No, and there's no way it could. I think the 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 kind of the best range output you can get out of the Hellraker is if you go with the heavy venom blaster head, whatever it's whatever it is, the venom spray or the corrosion spray, because it has reload. So you get 2 range
Uh,
12 sprays. It does cause a focus to reload, so you're effectively having 2 focus to boost with either your attack or your damage roll on either side. Whereas the I forget the name of the AoE gun, Death Harvest something? I don't know. Has a singular shot at AoE 3. Now, of course, any of those can be ancillary shotted by Chatterbane, but this model has no way to boost out of activation like Hades' gun could with a soul.
so as far as mercs, you guys probably don't use them too much. It doesn't seem like I haven't seen them a lot on lists
Um,
like this.
so I think Malgrith makes his way into some lists. If you want Entropic, kind of cute thing that Malgrith gives to, or I'm sorry, cute thing that Malgrith gets from the faction is Power of Death off of any one of the Furies. Just checks for friendly undead. So Malgrith does get +2 to his damage rolls while within Power of Death. Usually not a earth-shattering amount of difference, but it is something that he does get. And then beyond that, the only other mercs we really have are all of the super juniors that work for everyone, right? In terms of the ones I think you'll see, I don't think Magnus and Invictus really ever show up in Cryx lists. I think that because Invictus wants to wear Hellrot and the faction doesn't do anything else for him unless we take Calamity off the rack,
Mm.
there's just really not a lot of synergy there. I think Nostilla has a place in the faction. Aberration just has an incredibly hard body to kill against some armies that want to have spell debuffs onto it, whether it's mortality from Moraine to facing another Cryx player that might take Calamity. I think
Mhm.
if you play Nicane, instead of Visioning Aberration, placing Arcane Ward on it to make it spell immune also just prevents Hunter's Marks out of Shadow Flame Shard, for example. So making a spell immune aberration can be huge in some matchups if you play him with Nicane. But I think the model that really benefits from that the most, and that same package, is if you play Warboar and Carver. You can have Carver casting Batten down so that Warboar gets the armor bonus, and also have Nicane place Arcane Ward on him. So now you have a spell immune armor 22 Warboar that's putting out exhaust fumes and is giving a range profile to Cryx and still is incredibly hard to kill.
Right.
I think if you're going to be playing the juniors, I don't think Madison and Invictus really show up anywhere. It's not to say you can't play them. I generally don't think you have a tremendous need for them.
Right. They don't add anything.
Right. I think if you're playing Necrofactorium, I think Warborn and Carver are something you should seriously consider. It might not be right for every list pair or right into every meta, but I do think that synergizes fairly well. And then I think Aberration and Nastilla are a bit more ubiquitous. Aberration is just a very independent model, and it's kind of just going to do its job no matter what it's standing next to. And then Nostilla brings in just a handful of kind of tech pieces that Cryx can benefit from. So if you're playing Kythos and you put Aberration a little aggressively, you got to be careful with this line. But with Nostilla bringing all, it makes your models even harder to hit under Kythos feet. You also get Revive to kind of continue the recursion plan. Another thing I failed to mention with Necrosurgeons is they have heal or repair or whatever, but specific for undead models. So if you have Nostilla Revive models, now your Necrosurgeon, instead of bringing a guy just back with 1 health, can now use the heal D3 plus 1. So you're reviving them with 1 health, and then they're healing them back up to 3 to 5 health total. So now your models just get even stickier on the table if you can afford to use that star action off the initiates. And then lastly, I think this doesn't come up tremendously often, but there's some games where it's insanely relevant. Is if you're going to take a pretty aggressive line with Nostilla and you can land Nostilla's spray on your opponent's caster to get brain damage on them, now they're not casting spells for a turn, can be hugely, hugely impactful.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. All right. Well, let's talk about the casters a little bit.
Sure.
And it sounds like, from what I've heard of people talking about Necrofactorium, that they're pretty much all viable. I mean, I've seen people make arguments for just about every caster that Cryx has. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think that is very true, right? And I think each caster does things a little differently. I think you can kind of high level lay out some casters as being more infantry focused and some being more jack focused. And even those you would put in the jack focus kind of approach the game a little differently. Some and those that are in the infantry category also approach it a little differently. But they're all viable. I think that speaks to some of the strength of the units in Cryx. But really, none of them are going to be able to play a gun line. So it's really about how the list has to approach the table. I'm happy to kind of run through them unless there's any order you want to go in.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Briefly, we can go through all of them. Yeah.
I'll go through very, very briefly.
Kind of give like kind of like what the flavor.
Sure. So very briefly,
Factors
we'll start with some of the more infantry-centric ones. Sepsira plays a really kind of great grindy game. She's tough to kill. Her feat bringing in an entire unit is really good for either one of two things. I most often play it as a way to begin the trading because I'm usually out-threatened and try to kill a unit, kill an opponent's warjack, whatever, and just get ahead on attrition and then start the game from that footing. A lot of players, and I've done this as well, will use it as like an assassination piece to where Sepsira is moving very aggressively to the middle of the table, feeding the models in. You're ghost walking those models and you're trying to charge your opponent's caster and just getting them with this like Mechanothrall pocket sand.
Yeah.
Both are incredibly viable. She herself also gets to do battle plans. Most often, you're going to put up Tactician. And the one thing that lets Sub-Zero do that the other casters don't do as well is you kind of get to leapfrog through your own army. So what I mean by that is your opponent might put up something that they kind of want you to fight against, but the goal would be that after you kill them, you can't get to the stuff behind it. Well, now you can go forward, kind of fight the things your opponent put forward first, and then your stuff that's behind that can charge through your models that went first and get to your opponent's models behind them, even without having to ghost walk your own things or anything like that. So that's one thing I think Sub-Zero does. Plays a very great grindy game. Plays a game where she can play kind of on top of herself better than the others because she puts up that tactician bubble and then also just has a great attrition swing of a feat. And then Nick Kane, I'd say, is also a pretty infantry focused caster, but for a very different reason. She has a static buff for incorporeal models within 10 of her, that while they're incorporeal, they gain +3 armor. So between Furies to Night Terrors to Machinery Dominators, who I did not talk about, I don't think Machinery Dominators get taken often unless it's with Nicane, but all of those things get +3 armor. So not only do you have an incorporeal skew, but you have a bit of an armor skew as well. Yeah, I mean, I mean, armor generally, if you're talking about armor skews, is like 21 armor plus. You don't
Right.
necessarily have that, but your cav are incorporeal and armor 19. So it can be tough to get through, especially if there's shield guards behind the Mechanothralls. You can make Nicane is the one that has the spell that makes a model or unit spell immune. So now you can have spell immune incorporeal models that are +3 armor. Like, it just can be a bit of a bear to get through all of it. So runs a bit of an incorp melee skew. I think she's also one of the casters that runs those super juniors the best for when those come out. I also think, and I guess instead of going through this cast by caster, the Hellraker I think is generally taken with casters that don't themselves have a range extension for their battle group models. It just so happens that Nicane and Subseer are really the two that come to mind first. Other casters that would fit that kind of role are Decithus and Kythos. Although Bitus corners you with Kythos, you're defense 9, and you have a caster that gives a bonus defense feat. So I don't think Hellraker's going to take him much with Kythos, but those are the casters that I think it generally makes the most sense with.
Gotcha.
Also, Spell Immune Colossal. What's not to love? So, but that's generally Nicane. Her feat is not always assassination focused, but you get to cast spells for life once each time, combined with just casting them for focus. The other part of it, beyond casting spells, is getting to boost attack and damage rolls off Nicane for health. So you can get out a lot of Venoms or a lot of Hellfires and can go for your opponent's head, or you can just try and remove a unit from the table, right? You can, with Lucky Penny or getting a free upkeep or whatever, can pretty easily get 3 Hellfires off on feat turn and then boost all the attack and damage rolls and you can remove a medium base unit. That's generally Nicane. Kythos, I think, is generally played for his feat. He has a 16-inch control area. Enemy models in it are -3 to all their attack rolls for a turn. It's just a very good defensive feat. And then is just trying to bring the already pretty good melee units Cryx has to bear, right? So his feat is just trying to deliver those melee models there. Beyond giving them defense, if they're missed, they get to place 3 inches. So there's a bit of added complication of, sure, I can send my Mat 9 heavy in to your defense 15 or 16 model, and maybe the feat will make you miss once or twice. And normally that might not be an issue, right? If you're going into any other model where you need 5s to hit, knowing that you might miss once doesn't change should you or should you not go in, because you get the other attacks, and if you hit enough of them, you might still kill it. Under Kythos feat, if you miss once, now the thing moves out of the way, you get to make no more attacks against it, and you can end up doing very little to no damage if you miss early on in that whole sequence. Combined with having a strong control effect in deadweight, that's generally Kythos. And then we kind of start moving. Kythos can be played kind of however you want. I would say generally I see him with more infantry. But now we really start moving into, I think, the more Warjack focused casters. Decithus doesn't really do much of anything for either his infantry or his Warjacks, short of Shadowmancer. Shadowmancer is a very, very good spell, so I don't want to diminish that. But he really wants Warjacks not really for what he does for them, but because they have soul claiming heads and they can then feed focus to Decithus. Beyond that, he's a melee bully. If you're looking for someone to buff your infantry, almost any other caster is going to probably do more for it than Decithus. Next up, we'll hit Eviscerus. Similar to Decithus, is not doing a whole lot in terms of supporting infantry, except for D-Cell. So now you're pretty chunky medium base units that had evasive, and I didn't mention Criterions have battle driven, so it can be a little annoying to deal with at range. Now we're also under D-Cell, so even harder to shoot. He also is the caster in Cryx that gives you the furthest threat ranges for your heavies. If you can get both the benefits of your feat and Redline, Malefactors with a 2-inch melee range threaten 15 inches, which is on the higher end of threat ranges in the game. Not many things threaten beyond 15. There's other things that threaten 15, but not many things beyond it. And he's like the one thing in Cryx he's the only thing in Cryx that can give you that kind of threat range. But really, that's kind of the other big thing for Decithus is his Field Marshal, which gives Retaliatory Strike. So not only do you threaten very far, and are generally playing a bit of a chunkier list to get through because of D-Cell, but if someone comes into you in melee, you get the chance to hit them back once. Cryx as a faction doesn't have any like knockdown weapons on. I guess Malfestor does, but ignore that. With the malefactors, Grendel, Hades, whatever, you don't have any knockdown weapons in mass, so you don't have the ability for like something to charge into you, hit you, you retaliatory, and knock it down in an activation. Because that exists in some other factions for sure. But that is his whole thing. Beyond that, you also RFP all opposing construct models that your battle group kills. Because of Chop Chop, effectively a second field marshal that just isn't labeled as one. And then the last caster that I haven't mentioned is Morton Abra, who, for a Jack caster, has the most consistent turn threat range. So while Eviscerus can threaten 15 for really 2 heavies on feat turn, that's the most you could possibly get, and can threaten 13 every turn for a heavy that's redlined. That's a singular one. Morton Abra can make all of her Warjack models, including herself, gain +2 to their threat range by casting mobility. So in terms of just a breadth of coverage, Morton Abra makes her army across the board the fastest, even though Eviscerus has a singular model that can threaten further. Beyond that, while there's not a lot of defensive buffing that Morton Abra is doing, right, there's no decel, there's no dig in for the feat. What you're trading out of the defensive side of the spell list, you're getting out of the feat itself, because you just get to recur, like old Thagrash won a Warjack that was previously destroyed. So you just get to bring it back. It has to sacrifice combat action, but you just bring the Warjack back to the table. And then beyond having mobility for that speed buff and beyond bringing a Warjack back, her biggest thing is that she has synergy. So really wants, because of synergy, to have a bit of a wealth of jacks. And that can be a mix of raptors and malefactors, but you want to be able to pretty consistently, at least in the middle portion of the game, have enough warjacks that even if 1 or 2 of them die, that you can get the models activating towards the end of the turn up to synergy 3. And I think that is all of them.
Awesome. And well, first of all, just a little thing about Kythos is that feat and something moving after you attack it is such a it's a puzzle that your opponent just gets stumped by. Especially somebody like I get distracted pretty easily, and just having something move out of turn is, for me, it screws all my plans up, and I'm not the only one. I'm pretty sure.
No, Kythos is very good. I think a couple things, if you're playing against Kythos, to keep in mind is he has a feat very similar to Zadaroth. The difference being is that in order to have kind of effectively the bonus defense, the opposing model needs to be in Kythos' control range. He does, of course, have a 16-inch control range, so it's hard to avoid. But if you're able to be outside of his control range and shoot in, my models gain, or the Cryx player's models, I should say, gain no defensive bonus. The only thing that comes up is should you still miss them, right? Should you shoot in from outside control range and miss? My model needs to be in range to still place. So, like, if you're shooting at a model that doesn't have the defense bonus and still miss, I still get to place. But if when playing against Kythos, I think the things to be cognizant of is if you can make attacks from outside control range, those are generally still pretty safe to do. And then the other thing is as you think about either shooting into stealth or any models with like spray attacks, like a model that can like take the Urson out of Old Umbry, right? So you charge him with a bear. You have a Cav model, so you have 3 dice to hit, probably pretty safe to hit through Kythos' feet. But then you take your spray attack at that target, even if, say, you crit knockdown on your charge target, and you take your spray attack off the Urson, and you're catching another model behind it. Well, now that other model behind it, if you miss, now would get to place. So sprays can be tough to use on Kythos' feet because you're going to accidentally put models under the spray, or you're likely to put models under the spray that you don't want to attack because then they'll end up moving on you.
Yeah, I never thought about that.
Yeah, so sprays can be tricky to use, but guns in general, if you can shoot from outside control range, are pretty good.
So what would you say is at least one caster in the army that you could play if you're just starting out? Something that it's maybe a little bit easier to play, not as tricky.
Yeah. So I mean that answer is to me 100% Sub-Zero. So Sub-Zero does a handful of things I think for players that are still kind of learning the feel of the game that other casters kind of can't let you do. So one, your positioning is a little forgiving by putting up tactician as a field marshal every turn. Not field marshal, as a battle plan. Sorry, couldn't think of the word.
Right.
Putting up tactician. Now you're positioning. You don't get in your own way, which is something that can happen often. You end up moving a unit. You place down guys, especially if those other guys you're placing down can't make attacks. And then 4 or 5 activations later in your turn, you realize that the kind of guys that didn't matter, if you will, are now in the way of a charge lane for another model. Sub-Zero fixes that. So I think that's pretty big. Beyond that, her Field Marshal for Gang Fighter makes it so that all of your Warjacks get better in melee by fighting things near other warrior models. So this is really great on the kind of damage amplification for your models. And then lastly, even if you have mispositioned and you've lost some models due to your opponent shooting or getting able to charge you or whatever, her feat can very quickly bring a game back to even on attrition just by bringing a unit into play. Those models get to fully activate so they can make their attacks. And then after all of that, those models just remain. So if anyone's been playing for a bit, but they're coming back in, and you can remember like Lich 2 in old Cryx, he would feat back models that have previously died. They would get to activate and charge, and then they would go away at the end of the turn. These models are far more like a Shade 1 feat that they come in and then they stay there. So if your opponents can't kill them, like let's say you feat to go charge some models that have charge into your lines, so your opponent's models are on your side of the table, if you will, and you feat to go kill those things, and your opponent doesn't have anything else that can go to your side of the table to go get them, well, now they're just there for later still. So she's just got a toolkit that I think, as people are figuring out positioning, really kind of helps just play the game, whether it's getting back even on attrition or making sure you don't get in your own way. Things to be careful of is it's kind of easy to learn bad habits by playing Sub-Zero, because if you're relying on tactician to make it so that you don't get in your own way, when you start playing not Sub-Zero, it can be easy to get stuck on your own models where you didn't in the past. So it's things to be cognizant of.
Yeah, use it as a tool, not a crutch
Right.
kind of thing. Yeah, that makes sense. So speaking of Sub-Zero, so we selected her as the one to start with if you're gonna jump into Necrofactorium. What would you say is like your list making process for her? What are common modules that you would add into a list with her? Yeah, if you want to kind of give us a rundown on list building for.
Sure. So I think general great starting points is she's going to want the Furies. I think she runs enough undead models that she just wants them. So I think those are a great spot to be. I don't even know if I mentioned Furies to this point, but Furies are going to make like almost every one of your lists. Maybe not all of them, but most of them. But you're going to want Furies. I think she as a caster runs 2 Sludge Thralls as good as anyone. And one thing that she can do for them that really no one else can is, while I've been really only talking about the battle plan for Tactician, the battle plan, which I forget the name of, that gives Repo 3, is very good for sludges. They can walk forward, spray, and then spread out, move further in, move back. Is a way to kind of make sludges a bit safer. So I think she runs double sludges very well. I think because Sub-Zero needs to kind of get up the table to use her feet, you're generally going to want 1 or 2 Mechanothralls to be shield guards for her, which means you also want a Scarlock Lieutenant. And I think she makes some use of some of the solos really well. So whether that selects us to move a model out of the way or into threat range of her feet, I think makes sense. I think an Iron Lich with her goes a long way. Even if all it's doing is walking forward and putting up Invocation of Blackest Night, which gives him Black Mantle, so that you can stealth Sub-Zero the whole way across the table, I think is pretty good. I think she really likes Dymestra, either for free upkeep to a free Ghost Walk if you end up racking it. And even if you don't rack Ghost Walk, Sub-Zero herself has Breast Stealer, and I have used Dymestra as a free Breast Stealer cast in games. And then because of her Field Marshal for Gang Fighter, whether it's Hades to Malfesser to just Malfactors to even Grendel, I think she generally wants 2 heavies of whatever variety you want. Gang Fighter on them turns a model that was good and makes it very, very good beyond just the normal buffs you can put out there by being Cryx. So I think those 2 get to play behind your infantry generally, but when they get to go in, are really good at kind of cleaning up whatever they need to clean up.
Awesome. So, what would you give out as advice on someone that wants to get better at playing in the army? What should you do or maybe not do?
Yeah, so I think the things that I would tell a player that's starting out with them to focus on is it's incredibly hard to kind of fight your opponent's army because everything out threatens you, whether it's your opponent walking forward and shooting to just their melee threat ranges to whatever. Like there's almost nothing in the game aside from a Cryx mirror where you're winning the threat range game, or even. Um, so it's incredibly hard to fight against your opponent's army. The way Cryx generally is able to win is by playing the scenario, whatever that scenario is. Almost every one of the casters has something they do that makes the army the army a bit harder to kill. So your job is to try to get to scenario elements and to stick around near them so that you're able to clean up whatever your opponents kind of put into them while also still having guys there after they come in. So what I mean by that is, like, if there's a center line objective, you could put a whole unit within 3 inches of it. If you're going to score it, that's sometimes worth it, right? But if you're just doing your best to contest, what you're sometimes best often doing is putting just one guy in within 3 of it, putting the guy that you're placing off of behind, like the guy you're placing off of should be behind that. And then the last guy in the unit, assuming it's a 3-man unit, would be behind that. So getting the entire unit becomes then a bit of a challenge, and they have to kind of reach in further. And if they can't kill a whole unit, then you're kind of recurring the front guy they might kill so they can score the scenario element with Necrosurgeons or with Revive off Nastilla. And then your job is then to go in and take care of the models that they're using to score scenario. And really, you don't have the ability oftentimes to reach out and get things in Cryx. You just don't have the ranged output or the threat range to do that. You're really just doing your best to win the trades around scenario and to kind of keep that going for the long term. So it can be easy to get discouraged when playing Cryx because you're going to go and almost inevitably in every game, you're going to get hit first by your opponent on turn 2. And then you've got to kind of figure it out from there. I would tell you that I think Cryx sticks to the table better than almost any other faction. And sometimes that means not necessarily just living, but the ability to recur the guys, right? So you're still around the table after that. So I think it's important for players not to get discouraged because they're getting hit first. You just have to kind of work through the scenario game to stay relevant on the table.
That makes sense. So, as far as stuff that they don't want to see, is there anything out there that Cryx doesn't want to see, or do they pretty much cover the whole field? I mean, they are a pretty successful army in the current meta, so I would imagine that they're not struggling into much. But do you think there's something out there that's
So I think for every faction, let me walk this back real quick. I'm sorry. I think for every Mark IV faction, and with the exception of not every caster within the faction, but every Mark IV faction, I think has game into every other Mark IV army. Right? Like I don't think there's any one faction that just can't beat another faction where it's just not possible.
right?
I think what's different in Mark IV is between the spell rack to a more limited model pool. It makes it so that everyone has kind of relevant choices and gameplay actions they can take to win games. I think the problems we ran into in Mark III was armies got so large and so expansive on the choices they could make, is you had such strong interactions that would make it to where some list pairs just didn't have an out for those things. And I don't think those kind of hard can never be solved questions for some lists exist much in Mark IV. That all being said, I think the things that Cryx wants to see the least generally is any gun line style list with the ability to repo after shooting. So I think a lot of the trades you have to take, or a lot of the things you have to kind of think about in Cryx, is when your opponent comes forward to shoot you, generally they're in range to be charged. Right, a lot of gun ranges are between that 10 and 12 range, and a lot of our threat ranges are about 10. If you're shooting at a lot of the medium base guys, after you shoot them once, they can evasive forward. So like that 10 and 12 range is where Cryx really kind of gets to be able to interact with an opponent's model. But if they can be at 10 inches away or whatever it is, and then repo 3, net 13, with the exception of night terrors, but even if you were to kill the night terror you shot at, then you can't do that, of course. With the exception of night terrors, you really don't have the ability to interact with. So if they can go forward, shoot, repo back to safety, or just shooting from 13 plus away, combined with having some models that are a bit more expendable that you can use to contest on scenario on like the rounds 2 through 3, maybe even 4 if they live long enough, depending on where scenario elements are at. So that Cryx can't get an advantage on scenario, and they can't get into the models that are kind of winning you the game, if you will, right? Like all your boostable guns in the back. If I can't get onto those models and I'm not getting ahead on scenario, I'm probably going to lose the long game. And I think you can do that out of a lot of factions. I think Khador has some really strong range options. Storm Legion does. Gravediggers do. I think you can make a fairly strong ranged Prime Blood list that covers a lot of those elements. So I think generally those are probably the things you're looking for. But I'd also say that I think, just going back to what I was saying in the beginning, that kind of every faction has game into every faction.
Right.
It's hard to come up with any one singular answer, but it feels like the thing you'd want to take advantage of against Cryx is that I don't have a range game. So the longer you can keep yours going, the worse it is for me.
Turning it to playing against Cryx, what are some pieces of advice that you could give out? Someone that wants to, that's having a hard time playing against them and wants to learn to play into them. What should they do, basically?
Yeah, I hear you. So I think big things you can try to do, and a lot of this is going to be without overextending, right? So I'm going to caveat and say that everything we're doing here has to try to be done without overextending, because I think that's the way that Cryx can capitalize, right? If they can bring their melee units to bear, I think that's generally very good for Cryx. So that being said, if you have the ability to remove entire units, that removes the recursion elements. If you have the ability to RFP from ranged, that removes the recursive elements. And if you have the ability to kind of push any models back, that can really limit the melee threats that come in. So what I'm thinking about to kind of try to maximize that is Agathon having Hellfires to RFP guys via spell. If you have, I mean, he exists in the game, not that he gets played much, but if you have like a Kruger 2 feet that pushes everything backwards, very not great for threat ranges. If you can shoot in AoEs into Mechanithrals and then kill entire units because they're only armor 13 with one box, then I can't recur any of them. So I think removing whole units is one thing for sure. And then the Furies do a lot of damage amplification with Power of Death for all the undead models. So if you ever have the ability to remove Furies, I think that is well worth the time and the effort, because it removes so much damage output across the models that are going to be committing generally. And then Cryx heavies have a tremendous actual melee output, but still suffer the same problems that old Cryx Warjacks did, where there's still 28 boxes. Armor-wise, they're 18. They go to 20 with a shield, but the arms just kind of fall off these Warjacks. There's not a lot of boxes before you start taking off the letters. So Cryx Warjacks, once they start getting hit, just kind of start folding. So if you can make a Cryx opponent want to send in a Warjack for scenario purposes, so they can score a point or whatever, but then you can kill it after they do that, they're not the most resilient or hard to kill compared to other factions' Warjacks. Melee output wise, they might be better than some of the other factions, but they're not the most resilient. Yes, I think kind of just to summarize this into bullet points, remove whole units. Anything that slows down or pushes opponents, or sorry, the Cryx models backwards or prevents them from charging is generally very good. And then if you can get onto the Warjacks, they can die fairly easily.
That all makes sense. It seems like the way to play against them is not to try and fight fair. Like they will outlast you. It's and like
Yeah,
you
well, I
said.
guess if you have a list that has RFP elements, right? So I think Silence of Death is big, Headshot is big. The more RFP elements, kind of no matter who you're playing against, are generally pretty good. Every list has
Mhm.
1+ unit of Necrosurgeon, so there's always some recursion. And if you can limit that by removing whole units or RFPing, you just remove one of the faction's kind of biggest strengths.
All right. Well, let's we're gonna wrap it up. do you have anything else you wanted to add? Anything, maybe something you're excited for playing in the future, or anything you wanted to add?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm really looking forward to going to Sweden. I haven't been to a WTC since 2022. I'm very lucky and honored to have made a team this year. I know I stepped away from the game, and there's a lot of very deserving players to go that have put in the time and the effort to do well at events. And so I'm very much looking forward to going, and I'm honored to be on a team and to have the teammates that I have. And in reference to direction, I mean, I don't follow releases very closely, but just from kind of seeing spoiled images and all that, like I think the release of those upcoming trolls to the other side, or at least the new releases for Orgoth and for Dusk, like I think the releases are coming out all look great. I also think that we've, for the most part, kind of stopped having the problem that we'd had better in Mark III, where something comes out and it immediately becomes not only very good, but like broken.
Yeah,
Like I can remember a few releases in a row where like Una 2 comes out, and not only is Una 2 good, but like if you don't have an actual idea for an answer for this, she just wins. And I don't think we've had it feels like the release schedule is pretty full. There's been a lot of releases. And I don't feel like there's been any one release that has just been so game warping that you have to have an answer or you just lose and everyone starts playing it at the same time, right? Either everyone's playing it or you have to have an answer, you lose. So I think like the actual releases are very good. I think the game itself, with the releases that are out and everything right now, is very good. It's interesting seeing communities kind of spring back that had not been around for quite a bit. I think the guys in Florida just ran the Crucible this past weekend, and I know Brandon Andrews and a handful of other guys who haven't played in years just played in that event.
oh, no kidding. That's awesome to hear.
Right, yeah, I just there's a handful of groups that are springing back up. I can tell you, living here in New Orleans, in the past few months, there's been guys that used to play in Mark III and all that that are coming out of the woodwork and showing up again that haven't been around for years. And I'm on the fence if I'm going or not. But I can tell you there is a car full of guys who are all planning on going to Warfare Weekend that haven't been probably since COVID. So I don't necessarily have anything to plug for myself or anything, but I think like I don't know how many people are listening to this podcast that are on the fence of should they play or should they not play. But
Yeah.
even if there's one person that is the case for, the game's in a great spot. I left it after not liking where it was and had no hesitation of still staying gone if it wasn't in a good place. And I think it's in a great place and thrilled to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. The main part of this podcast deals a lot with the community. We do we kind of bounce around all the different communities everywhere, and yeah, I totally agree that we're in the on the ups, and it's great to hear the more and more people coming back to the game. It's a great thing.
I mean, Boker Brawl hit its highest attendance, I think, this past year. Nova had to expand their ticket pool and is in the larger room again, and I think is only looking to expand again next year. Adepticon sold out near instantly. They're going to have to find more space for next year. There's a handful of kind of regional events that have come back. GigaCon just ran this past weekend. The Crucible ran this past weekend. Like a lot of the smaller, if you will, tournaments are firing back up. The larger events, I think, are hitting their capacities. I mean, it's all just great signs.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. And yeah, we'll definitely be rooting for you guys at WTC, and wish you the best of luck, man. um, and again, thank you for coming on and talking Warmachine, talking Cryx, Necrofactorium. Appreciate you coming on and giving us your insight. We definitely need tips to play and to play against Cryx, because they're definitely a good army.
No, they certainly are.
All right, so yeah, thanks again, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.